Senator Blasey had a conflict this morning, and Senator Baumgardner is on her way, and Senator Peck, I assume, is on his way. So we're going to start off this morning working 126 committee. Amelia, do you mind giving us an overview? And I would draw your attention, Eddie put together an updated sheet for us on all of the fiscal notes, the date we had the hearing and the dates that we moved on the legislation. Thank you very much, Eddie, for putting that together.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill number 126 would establish a new individual income tax credit for certain residential solar and wind energy property expenditures. It would provide that beginning with tax year 2023, there would be an income tax credit for resident individuals in an amount equal to 100% of the amount of the federal residential clean energy credit related to qualified solar electric property expenditures, qualified solar water heating property expenditures, and qualified small wind energy property expenditures. The credit may be carried over. Excess credit may be carried over into future tax years, but the credit is not refundable.
Committee, any questions for Amelia on the legislation? Seeing none, I have an amendment. Amelia, I'll start with the contents of Senate Bill 40. Committee will hand that out to you, another copy of Senate Bill 40. The motion is to include the contents of Senate Bill 40 into the contents of Senate Bill 126. Do I have a second on the motion? Well, I'll wait until you see what the bill is. The Senate Bill 40 is the net operating loss carry forward. I have Senator Holland.
Just a question, is that with that 4-year period? Yeah, I'd second that motion.
Thank you, Senator. So it's been moved by Senator Tyson, seconded by Senator Holland. I'll let you wait until you've got a copy of it. Committee, we have seen this before. Do you want a brief explanation of what Senate Bill 40 is? Amelia, do you mind? And the reason I am comfortable doing this is we did see this legislation last year. I was going to look up the voting record on it. I think it was unanimously or close on the Senate floor last year. Amelia.
Yes, Madam Chair, Senate Bill number 40 would amend 7932-117, which is our modifications to arrive at Kansas adjusted gross income for an individual. The amendment you will see on page 10 that provides, beginning with tax year 2018, the ability for individuals who carried back federal net operating losses arising from a certain provision related to the CARES Act, that they could, it would create a subtraction modification in future years so they could carry forward those losses.
Committee questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Committee, I do have another amendment. It's Senate Bill 81. Amelia, when you get a chance, would you mind giving us an overview?
Madam Chair, Senate Bill number 81 also relates to the calculation of Kansas adjusted gross income. It would provide a subtraction modification for the federal work opportunity tax credit disallowance and the employee retention credit disallowance. It would be to the extent of 25% of those disallowances. And I was just going to look for the language so I could give you the tax years. Yeah, it looks like the employer retention credit disallowance would be beginning in tax year 2020.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Was there a fiscal note associated with this?
Yes, it's approximately $7 million the first year, $2.5 million the second, $1 million the third.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. So I made the motion, and Senator Holland.
Yeah, I'll second it. I mean, this is a tax credit, I think, that has a very finite, limited time span. Once again, piggybacking on a federal program, so it makes sense to me.
So it's been moved by Senator Tyson, seconded by Senator Holland. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Committee, what are your wishes on the bill? Senator Holland.
Madam Chair, I move that we pass out Senate Bill 126 as amended, favorable for passage.
It's been moved. Is there a second on the motion? I'll second the motion. Oh, Corson, that's fine, Senator Corson. It's been moved by Senator Holland, seconded by Senator Corson. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, committee. We're on, the next bill is Senate Bill 138.
$38? It's this airfield. Yeah, okay.
Amelia?
Madam Chair, Senate Bill number 138 relates to property tax and would expand and clarify the property tax exemption for Strother Field Airport. It would add that ownership could be by the political subdivisions that comprise the airport commission, and it would clarify the property that is depicted on the airport's federally approved airport layout plan.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We've got a bill we passed out of committee previously, Senate Bill 97. It has to do with increasing the exempt amount on the 20 mills from the current $40,000 to $65,000, which was the Senate position last year. This would take effect in 2024, so I would move that we amend Senate Bill 97 into the bill we're working.
Thank you, Senator. And a copy of that bill is being handed out to the committee right now. I'll second the motion. Senator Holland.
Discussion, Madam Chair. So what is the nexus between the amendment and the underlying bill?
Property tax.
Okay. And just a question, do we have other property tax bills before us that we're going to work today?
I don't know. It depends on how much time we have.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'll be brief, Madam Chair. My concern with the underlying bill, the Strother Airfield, is that I think we heard from testimony, it sounds like this is in court somewhere working its way through, and I'm not going to vote on this motion, so that's why I'm not going to support the amendment, because I think we're getting out of our lane with some outstanding issues. Thank you.
Thank you. It was my understanding from the conferee that it would not impact a court case. So, committee, the motion before you is to add the contents of Senate Bill 97 into the contents of Senate Bill 138. It's been moved by Senator Peck, seconded by Senator Tyson. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Would you like to be recorded? Motion carries. Committee, we're back on the bill. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have another bill that this committee has heard, worked, and passed out favorably. That would be Senate Bill 94, or maybe we haven't passed it out favorably.
We did pass it out.
Did, okay. We did pass it out favorably, so I guess I need staff to hand out a copy of the bill,
We have it. They're ready to hand it out.
all right? And Senate Bill 94, while it's being handed out, would eliminate the 1.5 mils currently that's being assessed against property taxes. So this would be another tax reduction, and it provides for funding in the legislation to replace the property tax money with state general fund money.
Thank you, Senator. Is that a motion? It is.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was sort of waiting until the bill was passed out, but yes, that is a motion
Okay.
to amend it into Senate Bill 138.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved by Senator Peck, seconded by Senator Clays. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. Motion carries. Would you like to be recorded? Okay. Committee, what are your wishes on the bill? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would move that the Senate Assessment and Taxation Committee pass Senate Bill 138 favorably as amended.
It's been moved by Senator Peck, seconded by Senator Clays. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. Motion carries. Would you like to be recorded? Yes. Senator Holland would like to be recorded as a no. Thank you. Committee, let's turn our attention to Senate Bill 252. Amelia, thank you.
Senate Bill number 252 would provide a property tax exemption for certain business property operated in competition with property owned or operated by a government entity. And it would provide a sales tax exemption for certain businesses competing against governmental entities. The new Section 1 would provide the property tax exemption commencing with tax years after December 31 of 2023. And it would provide a property tax exemption for all real property owned and operated by a business in the state that is used for ambulance service, child care center, entertainment. There's a list of purposes of uses there. And it would require that it be located in a county where there is at least one facility owned or operated by a governmental entity that competes against the business, and that property is exempt from property or ad valorem taxation. There's also a similar sales tax exemption in 793606 that is provided. It does provide a sales tax exemption for qualifying businesses for both their purchases related to their business use as well as their sales. And I would be happy to stand for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions? Senator Holland.
Madam Chair, and I'm trying to move the process along, not hang it up. I have an amendment.
Thank you, Senator. I have a couple amendments too, so whichever one.
Could I run my first and
Sure.
the committee can resolve it and then we can move on? Madam Chair, so to preface this, I'm really concerned about this policy. I think it's very vague. I'm concerned about basically the shift to residential property owners by the unknown commercial property tax relief this would provide. I think it's also, I'm really concerned about how it could be administrated by Department of Revenue because I don't really understand the guidelines for determining what's in conflict, what is not. So I'm offering an amendment, Madam Chair. This would be a sales tax exemption on clothing. The nexus to underlying bill, sales tax exemption, and the amendment would gut the underlying language and then basically add a sales tax exemption for clothing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is that a conceptual amendment?
Yes, ma'am.
And there's
And
a motion?
I actually have a write-up for the committees. Eddie's provided a fiscal note, and I've got language So that's what's being offered.
We'll go ahead and distribute that information. That's a motion. Is there a second on the motion? It's been moved by Senator Holland, seconded by Senator Reddy. We'll wait until the information's available. Thank you. Any questions on the motion? Discussion? Senator Holland.
So a little bit of background on this, Madam Chair. Prior to my residency in Kansas, I lived in Minnesota. Minnesota is a streamlined sales tax compliant state. And one of the things I thought was really cool about Minnesota is that they had a sales tax exemption on clothing. The definition is coming straight from Minnesota. It is streamlined sales compliant. It avoids basically exempting luxury clothing goods. And once again, I just want to get this for the committee and just get that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, we will discuss the motion, dispose of the motion, and one way or the other, whichever way it goes. Any other discussion on the motion? Senator Clays.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my understanding that the motion here is a gut and go, so it would remove the contents of 252. You know, I think both of these items deserve their their debate, so I will vote against this motion, and not because I'm against the idea of a sales tax reduction for clothing necessarily, but because that could easily be entered as its own bill and be debated here in this committee. But it also takes away the opportunity to discuss further 252 on the floor. So I will oppose this motion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And if we have time, I would refer back to the order of business on bill requests if this does not pass. So any other discussion on the motion? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So a question for the maker, and we've got definition, but as I'm reading this, it's a $122 million fiscal note, and any item of clothing purchased throughout the year in the state of Kansas would be sales tax exempt. Is that correct?
Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's per the definition, what's been handed out in the conceptual amendment. You can see the list there on pages 1 and 2.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I see the list, and of course, we were just handed this. It looks pretty extensive, but I don't know if there are any exemptions that could potentially cause grief for merchants, but even be that as it may, I'm going to be in agreement with what Senator Clays had said. I would be happy to look at this as a standalone bill and see what the committee thinks about it. It is an interesting concept I'd never heard of before. So I can't support this at this time. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay? No. Motion fails. Would you like to be recorded? We're back on the bill. Committee, I do have a couple of amendments, and for Senator Peck, I would tell you there's a few states that exempt clothing and food. Oregon is one of them. I do have family out there. It's kind of nice when you go through a drive-through. So. The first amendment I have is the ambulance, to delete the word ambulance. Committee, do you need a printout of that? We do have it ready if you do. No, everybody's comfortable with the motion? Okay, great. Thank you. Actually, it deletes two words, ambulance service, sorry, to be accurate. Any questions on the amendment committee? Seeing none, I'll move my amendment. Is there seconds? It's been moved by Senator Tyson, seconded by Senator Beck. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. I have a second amendment committee. It is to delete, if you have the bill in front of you, thank you. It's to delete lines 32 and 33. Any other facility that receives any funds from property or ad valorem levied by a taxing subdivision. I move my amendment. Is there a second? Senator Peck. It's been moved by Senator Tyson, seconded by Senator Peck. Discussion on the motion. Senator Holland.
Just really briefly, I think the thing that I'm concerned about this now is that from a fairness issue, basically the TIF districts and all that stuff, I understand why it's being stricken, but then you still have basically government picking winners and losers of one businesses or the other. So that to me is conflicting in itself. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, any other comments, discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Committee, I have a third amendment. This one's a little bit more detailed. Committee, this amendment is to make sure that we don't have, if we have a government entity that is like a restaurant in one area, that another private industry doesn't move in and start a restaurant and apply for these exemptions. If you know that the business exists, then you can't basically game the system and move in. But if you were in business and the government established a business competing against you, then you would qualify for these exemptions. Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to ask a clarifying question from my understanding. So this, for example, would prevent any new fitness center in Johnson County from applying for this because there are already community centers in Johnson County. That's the intention of this, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I'll move my motion. It's been seconded by Senator Peterson. Senator Clays.
Thank you. Just to clarify that maybe even further. So let's say you're in a county and it has those public health fitness centers. Someone moves in and builds a health fitness center. Then somewhere in that county nearby, they build yet an additional health or fitness center. Would that then trigger the exemption for those entities if an additional one was built by the?
It's the government, built by the
Government
government.
built, yeah.
Yes, it would trigger.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, because those businesses would have been in existence. Yes. This bill is literally freedom from government competition. We should not be afraid of our government starting businesses that are competing with our for-profits. Senator Holland.
And just one other quick question then. What's kind of like the blast radius? Is it a county? How big is the area that's
County.
in contention? Is that specified in the bill?
Yes. Amelia?
Yes, Madam Chair, if you look on page 1 in line 15, it's located within a county where there is such government entity.
Discussion on the motion. Senator Corson.
So just to follow up a little bit on my question, the Senator Clays's question. So just again, going back to my Johnson County example. So right now, if we adopted this amendment, no new fitness center could apply for this relief. But as soon as a new community center was built, then every fitness center, private fitness center in Johnson County could then at that point apply for this relief, correct?
That is interpretation.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Discussion on the motion.
Madam Chair, I've had my hand up.
Oh, thank you, Senator Baumgardner.
Just to follow up on the discussion, so with your amendment and with the current underlying bill, if this bill becomes law, then any existing, we'll just go ahead and stick with the rec center. Any existing rec center then can apply for tax exemption. Is that correct?
Only if they can verify that they were in existence before the government business was started.
Okay. So, and when you have large counties with lots of different city townships or entities, then all they have to do is find the most recent one to be built, and they will have been in existence if they were in existence prior to that. Is that correct?
If the government entity started after the existing business in the county, yes.
Okay.
Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there was, in our community, there was recently a sales ballot passed to have, well, there might be in the future, it hasn't been passed yet, a talk about an indoor pool for the city to build. So if that takes place and there's an entity that has a private indoor pool for fitness, how does this process work in that? If it is private organizations lobbying to have an indoor pool by the city?
There would be a review, and if it is deemed a government competition, then the businesses would be tax exempt on property and sales tax.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Would you like to be recorded? Okay. Committee, we're back on the bill. Senator Corson.
So I've just got some serious concerns about this bill from a policy perspective. I also just regret that it was brought to us so late at the very end. This just seems like a major policy piece that we're kind of trying to ram through before I think it's ready for prime time. But I just want to give the committees a couple of my objections. The first is that we have no sense of what the scope and scale of this is going to be on counties. We have no idea what the impact is going to be in Sedgwick, in Johnson, in Shawnee, in our rural areas. We just don't know that. So we're really flying blind. I mean, you know, I'll use my county. I don't know if we're talking about millions of dollars that they'd have to make up in residential property taxes. I don't know if we're talking about tens of millions of dollars. I have no sense of what that would look like in counties across the state, and I don't think we know that. The second, I asked yesterday research, and I would just wonder if they were able to dig anything up on if other states have this. So would love to get an answer to that question. And then I do think that the county is not the right measurement for this, because we have so many counties, both our rural counties that are geographically very large, and then even our counties like Johnson that are not as geographically large but densely populated. I think to say that, you know, a community center opening up in one corner of a county should then exempt a private fitness center opened up in the completely opposite end of the county. I just don't think in most situations that there's actual competition there. So I don't think that, I think this should be limited much more tightly geographically to maybe a 3-mile radius, a 5-mile radius. We can debate that, but I think just to do it on a county-wide basis is wildly off base. So to me, this feels rushed. This feels not ready. And I'll just share with the committee, I got an email yesterday, and I didn't ask the gentleman if I could make his name public, but he is a county appraiser in a rural Southwest county. And what he wrote to me is, he said, we've got a local airport that has a restaurant that's open to everybody. The property is exempt as the airport is owned by the city. This bill would make all of our restaurants exempt under this bill. This shifts the taxes to our homeowners and farmers. This bill doesn't eliminate the amount of taxes needed to maintain our local governments and schools. This is only one example why I'm against this bill. I dislike property taxes as much as any taxpayer, but I don't want to see taxes shifted. And I think that to me is the big problem under this bill, is the shift in the tax burden. And that again was from a rural county appraiser. So I just want to share that with the committee. Those are my big picture concerns with this legislation, which I very strongly oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Corson. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The previous example is no longer valid because of the amendment. Now it requires government to really ask themselves the question, how important is it for us to go into business against existing entities that are out there providing the exact same service? And I believe, and I think that this is a great bill now that we've had these amendments on here, that government has the opportunity to ask itself, do I want to forego the property tax revenue that exists out there from these entities while I decide to go into business against them? Government shouldn't go into business against for-profit entities that are out there. That should be a no-brainer. But when they choose to do so, there should be a consequence to that, and it should be in the favor of the private citizen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, any other discussion? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too am in opposition of this bill. And one, I think the property taxes, as mentioned before, our residents and workforce would be carrying the load of the property taxes from businesses, which we often incentivize so they can bring their businesses to our community. It's unfair to our residents and, city and county services that would be received by businesses that are not paying property taxes, such as fire, ambulance, hospital, whatever it might be, roads, infrastructure. There would also be, those are the benefits they would be gaining for the community at large by paying their property taxes. I think it's just better for all. And lastly, this limits developers and chambers of commerce which want to have partnerships with city and local governments for ballot measures such as indoor swimming pools or quality of life measures such as quality parks or trails or tennis courts. There's no more reason, there isn't a reason anymore for developers or chambers to partner with cities which would have benefited the community at large, because we often don't think of cities as competition to private sector. The private sector is there to make a profit, whereas the city and local governments are there to benefit an entire community. So for those reasons, I will be opposing this bill. Thank you.
Further discussion on the legislation? Senator Corson.
Yeah, I sort of asked the question more rhetorically, but do we know if we were able to get an answer to my question from yesterday about if any other states have this policy or anything similar in place? And also, do we know what the impact will be on counties? I would ask those two questions of research, because I think, again, that information is critical before we do such major policy.
Thank you, Eddie.
So as to the impact on counties, the answer is similar to what is provided in the fiscal, the same as what is provided in the fiscal notice. We just don't know, and it's difficult to say how many instances of this there might be throughout the state. You would need to know that, the entire number of applications that might come in on this. In terms of do other states provide this same sort of approach? In my research so far, I have not found any, but I have not been able to conclusively state that that's true for all 50.
Thank you. And while I was doing research, I came across documents from the 90s and 80s, 1980 and 1990s on this issue. So nobody's ever really tried to address it, but it is an issue. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be happy to offer an answer to that previous question. This bill has zero impact on counties. Zero. With the amendment, it has no impact. It requires the county to decide, after this bill is passed, to go into business against existing businesses. So there's zero impact unless the county decides they want that impact. They get to decide that, not us, not here today. This bill says nothing happens until you compete against existing businesses. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Clays. And I think we're going to have an amendment to the amendment to make sure, just as. Senator Holland.
Yeah, just follow up Senator Clay's comments. I appreciate his point, but I think the point, my concern is that we're talking about a significant shift of property tax burden. And for our suburban major metropolitan areas, when you look at the tax base of those populated counties, the vast majority of that property tax class is on residential homesteads. That is the cash cow of how the state runs. So I would like, Madam Chair, I would like a basically an impact request from research by county of what is that shift from commercial to residential, because overnight, if this passes, you will see hundreds of businesses file for this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you. And back to Senator Clay's point, the decision is on the government at that, to decide. I want to get clarification from the reviser. There seems to be some confusion on the amendment that we just passed, and so we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Amelia, would you mind speaking to that, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm sorry. And this is just a clarification based on some of the discussion that's happening for clarity of the balloon that was just adopted that reads, such competing activity by the government entity began after the business started using the real property for qualifying purposes. It does not have a date in which the government entity would be, that would imply that this provision, that the government entity's activity needed to start after the effective date of this act or after December 31st of 2023. So if you did have a situation where there was a private business grocery store that began in 2010, a city came in and began a grocery store in 2015, and that is continuing on beyond the effective date of this exemption, then they might, if they are using, I guess grocery store isn't in this list. I shouldn't have used that as an example. It's restaurant, sorry. But if they met all of the qualifications, that is the timing. It's just a which business started first question, not a, it has to have been a decision after the effective date of the act.
Thank you. So we can put a date, but the intent was for the existing situation to be able to apply for it too. But we can put a date. The committee is, that is definitely an option. So Eddie, do you want to reply to Senator Holland's request? Okay. Senator Holland.
Okay, so, and Amelia, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to lay this scenario out for the committee. Day one, when this bill becomes law, you're going to see hundreds of claims made by gyms, restaurants, daycare providers, and these claims, I'm understanding, could go back, I don't know how many years, and I'm assuming the way the legislation is written right now is the state is not only, it's not, guys, just going forward. Is there not a tax liability for all the past years that we had the unfair government competition for these entities? If somebody could clarify for that, me.
Senator, no, the bill's not retroactive. They cannot collect in previous years. It would only be going forward that they would be exempt. But if the scenario existed prior to this year, then they could apply going forward. But nobody can apply for exemptions in the past. Senator Corson.
So then I guess that sort of changes the answer to my initial question, which, because then every gym in Johnson County could, even under this amendment, apply right now. So, because initially I thought the answer was that they couldn't unless something new opened, but I think now it's that they all could apply. So I don't view this amendment as really limiting anything or limiting very little. I mean, I think this narrows the scope of this very little. And I just wanted to maybe take issue with something that Senator Clay said, or to respectfully disagree with him, because I think the way this bill reads now is you could essentially have one city in a large county ruin the party for everybody else, because that one city could make a decision to open up a pool or a community center or what have you, and then all of a sudden the whole county loses all of the tax revenue from all of the restaurants, all of the daycare centers, all of the fitness centers, not because of a decision that the county made, but because of one small city within that county made, and the county didn't have anything to do with it. So the counties are on the hook for actions taken by one particular city in the county. And so I find that to be really unfair. Maybe it's an unintended consequence, but it's not just that they get to think about, do we want to compete? It is, you're now on the hook for somebody else's decision. So I just think this is really troubling policy. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the discussion. I sincerely do. I'm going to ask a question throughout a scenario I think will potentially require that we have an amendment from my perspective. And my thought would be that if it was narrowed down to city and if it had a start date going forward, the reason I say that, I will use my home county as an example. Montgomery County, Independence, Cherryvale, Coffeyville have grocery stores. However, what I consider my hometown of Caney did not have a grocery store. It just couldn't survive. So the city, 3 or 4 years ago, opened a grocery store. And my understanding is, so this would be a question for our revisor or our research, I guess revisor would be that Caney grocery store owned by and operated by the city, because it is in Montgomery County, would exempt from sales and property tax the grocery stores in Coffeyville, Cherryville, Independence. Is that correct?
Amelia?
Madam Chair, I would like to clarify that earlier my example was not fantastic because grocery stores are not in the qualified list of purposes that are subject to this bill. So grocery store in my example was not the best example. Maybe restaurant would be a better example because it's in the list. It is within, the current language of the bill is that, that the real property owned and operated by the business and used for one of those purposes is located within the same county as another competing facility owned or operated by the governmental entity. So yes, the private business could be in one community, and the government entity's competing business could be in a separate community within the same county, the way it currently is written.
Thank you, Amelia. Did that answer your question, Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In looking through new section 1, I understand that it would not apply to grocery stores, and Montgomery County is not the only one. Neosho County also has a grocery store in Erie owned by and run by the city. But if grocery stores were not in here, that would not have an impact on Montgomery nor Neosho County. I still would certainly support narrowing this down to a city versus a county. And I really like the legislation. It disturbs me that government competes against private business. I'm not in favor of bigger government at all. I prefer private business to run most everything for us. So, but because of the fact that the reviser answered my question and alleviated my concern regarding a grocery store, I've got my answer. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Committee, any other discussion? Senator Pack, did you have an amendment for us? You had mentioned one in the beginning.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It would be conceptual. Okay. So I will throw out that we narrow it down from county to city limits.
Amelia, is that doable? We had some discussion on this, Senator, when we were working originally on the bill. There was some input. Amelia?
Just as a reminder, the language relating to located within a county is both in the property tax provision and the sales tax provision. So if there is an amendment, it would be helpful to clarify that you intended the amendment to apply in both exemptions.
Thank you, Senator Pack.
And then relating to just replacing the word county with city would limit if you read the language, if you change county to city, it would require that the real property owned and operated by the business be located within a city. And is that your intent?
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I got that. I appreciate that clarification, but I fully understand, and that would be my intention. If something's out in the county, not likely to happen, I would not think. But should it happen, the legislature meets every year. We could certainly come back and readdress that. But again, the underlying concept of Senate Bill 252, I'm fully in favor of. We just need to be careful how we pass the legislation out and try not to have unintended consequences reaching out there. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. So is that a motion? And would you restate it for the record?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, it is a motion. And, you want me to restate the motion?
Yes.
Okay. So I would move that, and we're going to have to give some leeway to our reviser and make certain that it's written properly. But simply stated, we will narrow this down to cities versus counties.
In both the sales tax and the property tax?
In both sales and property tax. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, so you've heard the motion. Is there a second on the motion? It's been moved by Senator Peck, seconded by Senator Clays. Discussion on the motion. Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a point of clarification, so if the county were to have a restaurant in a county facility, then all of those restaurants in all cities, or just the city where the county facility resides?
The city where the county resides.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other discussion on the motion? Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be quick. To me now, we're getting to really local control issues because what I'm hearing from the committee now is that we're really excited about unfair competition in our major metropolitan areas, but everybody else, it's not an issue. So I'm getting more and more concerned as we're rewriting this bill on the fly. Thank you.
Senator, that's what we do in this committee. We make amendments to bills and we discuss bills. I am amazed that individuals that have been in the building this long don't understand the process. Senator Peck, discussion on your motion. Would you like to respond to the comment? Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay?
Nay.
Motion carries. Would you like to be recorded? Okay. Committee, what are your wishes on the bill? Senator Baumgart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier in the discussion, I had my hand up on my phone. I think I lost some communication because of pouring rain. But one of the questions that I did have, I was unable to find that we have any allowance in here for decisions, and I will use the rec center as the example. Communities, some communities actually vote. They take it to the voters to approve the funding for the rec center. So I didn't see that there's any carve out when the community has voted that this is what they are wanting. Is that correct?
There is no language in there.
Madam Chair, I don't have the data as to how many rec centers that are in place in our state by virtue of a community vote. But I think something like that, where the voters have had their say that this is what they are committing to make it available for their particular community, I would hate to see that that would be circumvented when they took that action. So I'm hesitant to make a conceptual amendment motion right now. I understand it's in order, but it's not backed by any data. And I like to make decisions based on information where we can say this is how many communities would be impacted by that potentially. But I think it is something that does deserve some consideration. And in fact, when an amendment similar to this bill was on the Senate floor, that was one of the things that I did talk about because communities have voted. I know that several communities in my Senate district have voted specifically for something because they have wanted that and they've invested in that. So I just want the committee to know that I will be looking at that type of amendment.
It's fine. Committee, any other discussion? Senator Corson.
I would just really urge my colleagues to really think about what we're doing here. I mean, we're trying to address a problem that the Legislative Post-Audit Committee has spent many, many hours looking at and says simply isn't happening. Two, we're trying to address it without knowing any sense of the fiscal impact of what this would do to our cities and counties and what burden this could potentially place on our residential property owners. Three, we're doing something on a bill that we just heard yesterday that none of the other states in the United States of America currently do. So that gives me real pause for those three reasons. So again, I wouldn't be supporting this, and I think that we haven't really successfully narrowed this in the way that we'd hoped, because going back to something Senator Clay said earlier with the gentleman who reached out to me, the county appraiser from rural Kansas, I think that, Senator Clay had said that none of that, there would be no impact. I think there would be a significant impact based off the fact that we haven't really successfully narrowed this. So those are 4 points out there for the committee's consideration. And again, I just think this is really, really wrong-headed policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Erickson. And for a minute, pause. I want to make clarification. There was a statement said that they like to look at the data. Committee, you guys know me, you know my background, math degree, computer science degree. That's all I do is study the data before we make these types of decisions. And I have checked with revenue, and they are not able to get that information for us. And I'm going to ask the Department of Revenue, or research, and I'm going to ask the Department of Revenue now, are you able to get that information for us, that any of these facilities were by a community vote, not a commission vote, not a council vote, but a community vote? Is there any way to find that out? No. So I've confirmed from research and revenue that we cannot access that information. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I've listened to the debate, I very much support the intent of this bill. Government should not be interfering or competing with private industry. My question, as I sit here and listen, is stemmed more around from an education background, how we are trying to foster public-private relationships and maybe some unintended consequences. And I would just like to make sure that we flesh that out as it relates to those public-private partnerships and making sure that we allow for those to go forward in the best interest and don't circumvent that through well-intended legislation that I do support. I just want to make sure that we have clarity on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I will be glad to ask research about that. But you guys, when you hear the term public-private partnership, ask yourself what that really is. That is a private business that has figured out how to use public funds to increase their investment or improve their position. Private-public partnership. That terminology is just amazing to me. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm thinking more in terms of when I was a school administrator, we would partner with businesses to come in and do fundraisers for the school. Food that would be provided, is that competing with the local restaurant in a facility of a school building? Those are the things I'm thinking about, Madam Chair.
Thank you for clarification, Senator Erickson. Thank you. Eddie?
I may want to wind up handing the microphone off to Amelia here in just a minute about this, but I believe the question and concern gets to the language that is provided for in subsection B2. You might remember that the bill as introduced included subsections to that, paragraphs to that A and B. You've now stricken B, so A is all that remains. And so the key language would basically be the ownership and operation of the facility. If that is done by the governmental entity in question, then it would potentially trigger, assuming the rest of it would trigger this, assuming the rest of the requirements of the bill are met. If the ownership or operation of the facility, if the ownership and operation of the facility are not by the taxing entity, then it wouldn't trigger. So the key is the ownership and operation of the facility where the competing activity takes place.
Senator Erickson, does that clear it up, or do you need more information?
That's very helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Eddie.
Committee, any other questions or discussion on the legislation? Seeing none, what are your wishes on the bill? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Pardon me. I would move that the Senate Assessment and Taxation Committee pass Senate Bill 252 as amended and recommend it favorably.
It's been moved by Senator Peck, seconded by Senator Clays. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, committee, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. Motion carries. Would you like to be recorded? Senator Holland, Senator Corson, Senator Reddy would like to be recorded as noes. Committee, we're turning our attention to Senate Bill 248. Committee, Amelia, will you give us an overview?
Madam Chair, Senate Bill number 248 would provide a sales tax exemption for sales of healthy food, and it would repeal the state rate reduction for food and food ingredients beginning January 1 of 2024. Specifically, Section 3 of the bill would amend KSA 793606 to add a new subsection to provide a sales tax exemption for all sales of healthy food for human consumption beginning January 1, 2024, and there is a definition of healthy food included. The exemption would not apply to prepared food. At the same time that exemption would go into place, the bill would also repeal 793603D, which is the current statute that provides the state rate reduction for sales of food and food ingredients. That statute would be repealed. There are other amendments within the bill to remove references to that section. And then there are also provisions that would maintain the current 17% of sales and compensating use revenue That revenue that goes to the state highway fund is currently at 17%, and it would remain at 17%. It would remove the scheduled increase that is scheduled to go into effect, I believe, January 1 of 2025 to 18%. It would remove those provisions. And I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Questions? Seeing none, what are your wishes on the bill? What are your wishes on the bill, committee? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be strongly opposing this because, one, no other state in the country does this where they try to classify healthy foods. I think this would be an absolutely administrative nightmare for our grocers, especially our smaller grocers. I mean, the idea that they're going to be able to do these codes for every single item in their store and figure that out, I think is going to be an administrative nightmare for our retailers. Number two, it's going to be confusing for Kansans who are now going to be looking at receipts and unsure, is the white rice, is that one tax rate? Is the brown rice one tax rate? Is the quinoa covered? Is that back at 6.5%? Is that 4%? What is that? So I think it's going to be a nightmare for retailers, nightmare for consumers. It's going to raise taxes. This is a tax hike. Let's be clear. This is a tax hike, and it especially is going to hurt the working families. So this is a tax hike on working families. And I think it goes back on a promise that the legislature made just last session. This policy has been in place less than 50 days, and we're already going to be repealing and replacing. And my question would be, what changed? I mean, what's changed? I think we passed the policy last session. We deserve to have it implemented. It also puts our retailers, we're back to putting them at a competitive disadvantage with all of our neighboring states, all of which have a lower sales tax on food. So I just can't think of anything good that is in this policy, so I'm strongly opposed. Thank you.
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my understanding this brings the rate to true zero. Is that not correct?
Amelia.
On the sales of food or on the sales of healthy food as defined in the bill, it is a sales tax exemption in 793606. And as an exemption, it would make it exempt from state and local sales taxes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That sounds like a sales tax cut to me. I would move that the committee recommend Senate Bill 248 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second on the motion? It's been moved by Senator Clays, seconded by Senator Peck. Senator discussion, Senator Corson, and then Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to respond to something that my colleague said just now. I think this is another example, a great point that I brought up now that I failed to bring up that he triggered for me, which is this is another thing that's going to devastate our local tax bases, and it's just going to be more. How much damage can we do in 90 minutes on our residential property owners? Because now we're impacting local control. We're going into what these cities can or cannot do. We're taking money out of a local tax base, and we're just going to put it back on our residential property owners. So I think in an hour and a half, we're doing a huge amount of disservice to residential property owners because this bill violates local control. I think one of the pluses of what we did last year was that we left the cities and counties whole. I would like that to continue. I don't think it's our place to be dictating that to them. So I think the fact that it goes to true zero, in my mind, is actually a negative because of the impact that's going to have on these cities and counties. So thank you.
Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a number of problems with this bill. Number one, make no mistake, this is now a tax increase on grocery foods. This flies in contrary to what we passed last year as a legislature. Obviously, campaign promises were made on both sides. So I think it's a real slap in the face to Kansas consumers. Number two, this is not, my understanding, necessarily streamlined sales compliant. Number three, I found Senator Masterson's comments about this bill and his support for this just incredibly confusing. To me, he made the discussion more incoherent. I couldn't understand if this is a true march to zero for healthy foods, or if we're really doing this because we really need to raise the taxes on grocery foods now so we could pay for the flat tax. And so just those comments and this bill just raise a whole raft of concerns for me that I think are very anti-consumer. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Eddie, would you mind addressing the streamline? And then Senator Peck.
Yeah, I checked with the executive director of the Streamline Agreement Governing Board on this, and they indicated that this bill would put Kansas out of compliance with the Streamline Agreement. Within the Streamline Agreement for product-based exemptions, if the Streamline Agreement has a definition for the exemption, you're required to use their definition, and that includes all items within that definition. This would be a kind of subset of all items included within the Streamline definition of food and food ingredients, and within the Streamline Agreement, states are only allowed to carve out portions of defined terms if the agreement itself provides for a specific exclusion for those portions. So, and it doesn't as it relates to healthy or non-healthy foods.
Thank you, Eddie. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to disagree with some things that have been said. This is indeed a tax cut because it is a 0% on healthy food rather than 2%, plus the locals, which is going to be 5%. So we're going from 5%, speaking locally for me, down to 0 on healthy food. As relates to the administration of the items, there are already out definitions by women, infants, children's WIC as relates to healthy food, and that's what this is based on. So merchants who accept WIC absolutely will have no problem because their systems would already have that definition of what is healthy foods, so therefore what would be sales tax exempt. I support Senate Bill 248. I think it's the right way to go forward for Kansans, particularly low-income Kansans. It incentivizes individuals to take better care of themselves, purchase less junk food and more healthy food, which I believe is a good thing. It doesn't require, but it incentivizes. So I just thought that I would mention the fact that the administration part of it is not an issue to me because I believe it's already out there being taken care of. And again, I see it as a tax cut on all Kansans who purchase food. And being on a border, I can see that this would increase these sales to out-of-state individuals coming into Kansas to purchase their foods. And we know when individuals cross the state line to purchase certain items, they're going to purchase additional items, which is going to be a revenue enhancement, bring in more money for state and local government. So I'll be supportive of Senate Bill 248, provided we get to a vote before I head to page pictures. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator, any other discussion on the bill? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion appears to carry. We can. All those in favor, say aye, or raise your right hand. Motion carries. Then all those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries. Committee, okay, thank you. It's your bill next. Yes, I'm sorry, I meant to ask. Motion carries. Senator Corson, Senator Holland, and Senator Reddy would like to be recorded as no votes. Committee, I'll turn your attention to Senate Bill 128. Amelia, would you mind an overview?
Madam Chair, Senate Bill number 128 would establish the Ad Astra Opportunity Tax Credit to provide an income tax credit for taxpayers with eligible dependent children not enrolled in public school. The credit would be in an amount equal to the amount of base aid as determined by KSA 725132. I'd be happy to provide more details, but I do want to refresh your memory that a couple days ago, when you were addressing this bill, there were some amendments offered that were adopted, and I'm trying to find those right now. I apologize.
It was the non-refundable carry forward.
Correct. And the technical amendment to correct some language relating to the homeschools.
Yes. Both amendments. Committee, Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have an amendment.
Thank you. Would you distribute the amendment?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to explain the amendment. I know that there was all kinds of consternation that was shared about, oh my goodness, what if some of the parents didn't actually expend what is the base aid? And so I just simply on page 2, number 3, it indicates that taxpayers may be required to provide documentation of educational expenses. And I just came up with a list of what they would include but not be limited to, amounts paid for, and I included the types of things that would be used in any educational setting. So it could be computers, tablets, printers, copy machines, Wi-Fi, video equipment, books, textbooks, study guides, calculators, science materials and equipment, musical instruments and music books, athletic supplies and gear, concurrent enrollment tuition, accredited non-public school tuition, tutors, subscriptions, transportation and admission, fees for field trips, school supplies, CDs, DVDs, and other learning materials, equipment, and supplies. So it simply is codifying that aspect that certainly at any time a taxpayer may be required to show documentation. And it lets everyone know the types of things that they would track and might need to provide if they are asked to provide that documentation. So that is my amendment, and I'll move my amendment.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion? Senator Clays. It's been moved by Senator Baumgardner, seconded by Senator Clays. Discussion on the motion, Senator Holland.
Very quick question for research. The bill as it came to committee, this was a fully refundable tax credit, correct?
It was to begin with. It's not.
And then we've amended it to make it basically fully,
Non-refundable carry forward.
okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could ask to make an amendment, did she consider the possibility of giving them a credit of like 1/20th of the average teacher in Kansas compensation package?
That could all,
Senator Baum.
oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. That absolutely could be, and that's why I didn't, I made it very clear, including but not limited to. Because the other thing that we do know is we have families that are working together in pods, and they're hiring individuals to either teach or tutor, so those would be included as well. But if you feel that language should be included, I welcome that as a friendly amendment to this amendment.
Okay, let's dispose of this amendment, and then we can consider that. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. So it says taxpayers may be required to provide documentation. Who would that documentation go to? Who would be responsible for that? How many people might perhaps be asked to provide that documentation? Some of those details.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Baumgardner.
It's my understanding that at any point in time, a taxpayer of the state might have to respond to any deductions that they're claiming. And so I don't know what the rate of that is, I think that it would be my hope that it wouldn't be egregious, that every individual that applied for this wouldn't be dinged. But it would be whatever is that process that the state Department of Revenue has for that appeal.
Thank you. And Senator, we could ask the department, they are here, if you would like that answered. Senator Erickson.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have another question. It was my understanding that the proponents of this bill, one of the reasons they like this is because there wasn't any documentation or government records or so-called strings attached to the tax credit. So I would just raise that concern.
Yes, and Senator Baumgartner, if you'd like to respond, but I'll throw in the fact that with tax credits or any type of tax filing, you are always at an option of being audited by the IRS, and that's why those receipts would have to be kept. Senator Baumgartner.
And that was, to me, I think it's important with this type of legislation that eyes are wide open, that everyone understands with a tax credit of any type, you're going to be asked potentially to show your work. And so that's why I prepared this, to get over that obstacle of, oh my goodness, here's a tax credit and no one has to show their work. Well, I know that Kansans will, one, not lie. And if they do lie, they'll be held accountable. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a helpful amendment, but it doesn't get to the real concern that I expressed last week. This is more of a random, being prepared for a random audit. But my real concern is, I think that you should only get the amount of money up to base state aid that you actually spend. So this doesn't address the issue of if a student gets a scholarship and the family only spends $2,500, my view is that they should only get $2,500, that they shouldn't get the full base state aid. So this amendment doesn't go to that. It's a little bit of an apples and oranges. I appreciate the intent of it, and I think it is an improvement, but it doesn't get to, my view is you get what you spend up to a certain amount. This is more of dealing with kind of paperwork for showing your work for random audits. Thank you.
Senator, we can dispose of that amendment, this amendment, and the other one is in order after. Any other discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're back on the bill. Any other? Senator Peterson, yes.
Yeah, for discussion, I was thinking along the lines of a credit for the time that they spend teaching. And I was thinking if we could have it be assumed that they would receive 1/20th of the average teacher's compensation in the state. I don't know exactly how to word that.
Senator, I don't either. Committee, that's a pretty big change, and we'd need to do some research. It would be in order. We can hold off on this bill until after turnaround if you want.
Keep the bill moving. We'll work on it on the floor.
Okay. Senator Corson, did you want to make we have it in writing. Your motion is available if you want it. Would anybody else like to make that motion? Okay. Seeing none. What are your wishes on the bill, committee? Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we pass out Senate Bill 128 as amended favorably for passage.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Moved by Senator Baumgartner, seconded by Senator Peterson. Discussion on the motion. Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do want to thank the committee that we got to have this discussion because it truly is tax policy. And so I thought that was really fun to have this discussion. But just, I'll be opposing this on a couple reasons. Number one, we got to have the discussion about the formation of actually the tax credit, and I think that's appropriate for this committee. I'll be quite honest with you, though, I don't know how this impacts the unintended consequences, the school finance formula, or what this is really going to do to, drive students potentially from our public schools to the private, so I will be opposing this. I guess the thing, though, I am interested in is that it seemed to me, as this bill came to the committee, and why I was interested in it is because as a fully refundable tax credit, okay, all Kansas kids' families could have truly enjoyed some benefits. And by making it now basically non-refundable, there is no financial impetus, there is no really mechanism for poor families to utilize this vehicle. And so to me, this starts to smell more like a voucher-like vehicle. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the bill, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Nay. Chair is in doubt. Division. Raise your right hand in favor of the bill. Okay. All those opposed? Motion fails. Thank you, committee. I was going to work Senate Bill 120, school sales tax on holiday, 29, Senate Bill 29, but we're about out of time. I would like to get to it. We have 5 minutes. Did I count right? Amelia, thank you.
Senate Bill number 29 would provide an annual back-to-school sales tax holiday for sales of school supplies, personal computers, and clothing. It would begin in August of 2023, and it would be a 4-day holiday, Thursday through Sunday. And I believe there were some motions that were withdrawn when we previously worked this, so I don't believe the bill has actually had any amendments yet.
We have not amended the bill at this point. Committee, what are your wishes on the bill? I know we're about out of time. Senator Reddy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm still getting used to the process. I did have an amendment. Is this the time to say something about it?
It would be fine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I looked at the chart that Eddie provided with all three of the bills, which are similar but have different nuances to them. One of the things with Senate Bill 29 was they didn't have any limitations, and I wanted to move, I forgot which bill had the limitations of 300 or less per item and certain restrictions on the cost for each item and how many items you can purchase, I suppose. I would like I don't know if they have the amendments in hand. I would like for Amelia to pass out the amendments so you can take a look at it and have a discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, we lose the room to caucus, and I would hate to get in the middle of this with amendments where we don't know where we're at. So let's pick up this legislation after turnaround. Is there any other discussion or business to be brought before the committee? Senator Reddy, thank you. We'll pick up with your amendment when we start back on the bill discussing.
Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Senator Baumgardner.
Madam Chair, do you intend to work Senate Bill 4 when we come back? That's the tax exemption for the School for the Blind.
We are waiting on language to see if we can get that worked out. What we are trying to do is to write language so that individual groups would not have to come to us, the legislature, that it would be one language. You either make the grade or you don't.
Okay.
And I think that would be the best way to handle this policy. I don't know if we're going to have that. We're waiting to see if that language is completed before we work any of that legislation.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, any other business or questions? Seeing none, thank you, committee. I know it's been a rough week or two, and I very much appreciate all your work. Thank you.